Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Now, on this Daily Tech Podcast, I've interviewed people in over 50 different countries, and the topics are all very similar about how technology is transforming every industry and indeed our lives. And on this show, we've had everyone from startup founders, business leaders, tech leaders, futurists, CEOs, and even celebrities such as William Shatner and Wendy Williams, and football teams such as Real Madrid and Manchester United, who have all shared their story. But it recently occurred to me, what about the people who are making a difference in the world of tech that we don't always get to hear about? What about those inspirational stories that can inspire people listening and kickstart their own career in technology too? So predictably, that's going to be my focus today. So I invited Arpan Sheth onto the show, who's a detailed-orientated development manager with experience of building systems and supporting millions of users. His career in tech began growing up in India, becoming an engineer, and now finds himself working for Twitter in San Francisco. But that's only part of his story. He's also helped a company scale from 200,000 users to almost 100 million users. But it's this journey to Silicon Valley that I want to hear more about. And I hope it inspires people listening in over 165 countries too, because there's just so much value packed into his story. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Silicon Valley so we can speak with Arpan Sheth, who's waiting to speak with us and share his story about his career in tech. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Arpan. Can you tell the listeners a little more about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So thanks, Neil, for having me on the show. My name is Arpan Sheth. I'm originally from a city called Indore in India. One tidbit about that, it is actually the cleanest cities in India. I did my undergrad there in computer science and engineering, and then came to Seattle for my grad studies at the University of Washington. Since then, I have been working at startups for the most part of my career. My last company, Saavn, actually got acquired by Reliance Jio, which is India's biggest mobile service provider. Since last December, I am working as an engineering manager at Twitter. And at Twitter, I lead a team of awesome engineers that builds the API layer that helps Twitter's advertisers, partners, and ad agencies to manage advertising campaigns. I have also led efforts in building complex ad products there that allows advertisers to plan for their user reach, as in how many users they can reach given a price and certain targeting criteria. And these projects are very important for Twitter as they are in a critical part of around $3 billion of ad business.
And this is a tech show, but I'm also fascinated by how people get into technology and start their career in tech and also share their personal story with me on this Daily Tech Podcast. So can you tell me more about your background and your journey that led from you being in India, of course, to being in San Francisco and working at Twitter?
Sure. So I realized early in my career that software gives you a huge amount of leverage and you can have a large impact on the world. You don't need a lot of capital to build a product on the software side. And if it is really impactful, people will use it. So I've always considered software as a means to solving a problem. I did my undergrad in CS, but did my master's in information management from really prestigious school at University of Washington in Seattle. So I really liked that, that course was particularly useful in making me a very better rounded IT professional and a tech person. I did a few internships at Disney Seattle and then at What Counts, where I also worked after graduation. The another thing was, in order to hone my technical skills, I had always had my own side projects just for learning. For example, like I built a train tracking app to learn Android development. I built a music search engine just for fun so that I can learn about how web crawling and indexing works. I also built a full stack for that music search engine and also build the content ingestion pipelines on the back end side. I actually have a very funny story about this. So my company was getting rid of its blade servers that go into the data center, and I had never been to a data center before at that time. So I thought that it will be a good idea to bring this really heavy server home, and 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 because it also had like really fast CPU and a high RAM. So I thought that I can learn a lot by setting a server by myself. And this was before like these cloud computing became very popular. So I realized as soon as I plugged it in that it was super loud, but it really kept my bedroom very, very warm. So looking back, I think that was pretty crazy, but it was very funny. My point with all of these stories is that I really like learning about how things work and how I can use them to build useful solutions. A lot of times, these learnings took me to some really interesting career paths. And one of the example is like I sent this link to a music search engine to Saavn, and that's how I got a conversation started with them, and I ended up at Saavn working for 7 years there.
You say they were crazy times, but you managed to learn whilst keeping yourself warm throughout the winter. So I think you're a genius, Arpan, or anything else.
Yeah, Seattle can get pretty cold sometimes, so that definitely helped.
Now, one of the reasons I invited you on the show today was to find out more about your experience in building a music service from 200,000 users to an incredible 100 million users. I mean, that sounds like an incredibly exciting project to be a part of, but can you share that story?
Sure. So Saavn actually is India's largest music streaming service. And the key differentiating factor that it focuses on how music is consumed by people of South Asian origin. As you can, in that context, a product will be successful only if it focuses on the diversity of the languages that supports various internet speeds and has like mobile device which are capable all the way from like a feature phone to $1,000 iPhone. The another important thing was to be really providing value to an end user who is very price sensitive, and the another good thing also is about like the potential number of users that are there. There are literally billion users there. Uh, I would just want to go deeper into the language aspect. Like people in India or the Indian music is really diversified across various languages, and a user can have interest and can like music from two different languages, or three or four different languages. And so you want to make sure that your content is really searchable, and you can allow this music to be queued in certain way that it merges and blends really well. So, you really need to understand the context in which music is being consumed. So all of these provides like really excellent opportunities for a startup to come in and solve these problems. In fact, venture capital firms also look for these high growth startups who have a huge potential user base. So I also realized about issues just like thinking like a venture capitalist, and saw that Saavn had all of like fine really had good market, and Saavn actually had some really amazing early engineers. Saavn acquired a consumer music property which was built by like four engineers, and that became the consumer offering. They were earlier in the business of selling uh, content from content. They were earlier in the business of buying content from Indian labels and selling it to Amazon and iTunes, and then they started to build their own consumer music product. So I joined that team, and I was able to do a lot and learn a lot just working along with this early engineering team. These are all like ex Yahoo engineers, and so they had like really good experience. In 2011, when I joined Saavn, it had around 200,000 users, and overall company size I believe was around 20-25 people. Our headquarters was in New York, and the engineering at that time was only in the Silicon Valley. We eventually expanded our engineering footprint in India as well, along with Silicon Valley. At that point, we were just like four engineers and a manager working out of really two cubes in an incubator. We had a website and an initial version of iOS and an Android app with really basic play queue and playlist management functionality with some virality also built into it, but really nice minimalistic product. Uh, so this truly was a ground level opportunity at that point. There were many products that we had to build to become a strong contender in a high growth music business. Uh, as we got licenses for more content from labels around the world, we built homegrown curation tools for our editors to build engaging playlists, complex licensing support software, content management systems to transcode millions of songs and images, like search infrastructure to surface right content across languages, personalizing our recommendations and using machine learning models for that, marketing tools to enable our marketing and product teams to build various growth and engagement components into the product. Uh, I was heavily involved in a lot of these things and owned a lot of consumer facing products at Saavn. Think of like web experience on desktop and on mobile platforms, Sonos, Google Home, Amazon Alexa. And I also led the team that managed the backend APIs, auto scaling infrastructure, deployment pipelines, programmatic ad buying systems. It was basically like, I contributed a lot also on like these organic growth efforts. Think about SEO. There are so many more projects and products that I can keep talking about that I worked on, and we can probably talk for like next 2 3 hours. But I really, really was passionate about Bollywood, and still I'm passionate about Bollywood music. And it was just like really an awesome place to go work and build things that were used by, and that was going to be used by a lot of users.
So at this point, you find yourself, with a platform with 100 million users on there. And then we're talking about big names as well, such as Sonos, Google, Amazon, Alexa and co. It must be a little bit intimidating at the same time. I mean, what were the biggest challenges that you encountered and how did you move forward and resolve them?
Sure. So as we grew, I had to bring a bit of process into how we shipped features at Saavn. We really all had like startup hustle mindset, but at the same time, I felt that we were doing too many things with a very, very tiny team. So we started focusing a bit more using various simple processes. Like for example, before we started dev work, we made it mandatory to having at least a one pager of what we want to build instead of just having hallway conversations. I mean, this sounds scary in hindsight, and we can think of it as like more of a cowboy programming. But it was like, we were just growing so fast that we had no time to think in detail about improving processes. And so that's when I had to like start coming in and thinking about solutions on how to make our engineering efforts productive and how we engage with our product teams. I also started leading our bi-weekly sprint planning meetings and weekly deployment cycles. All of this really brought a lot of order in our everyday chaos, especially between like our product and engineering teams. As growth occurred, we also had like a lot of on-call issues, and there were a lot of long nights. We really were squeezing as much juice as possible out of our backend infrastructure. Uh, as we early engineers, almost all of us shared our DevOps responsibilities, and that led to a culture of building solutions that led to stable systems. As it really gets tiring, getting paged at 2 a.m. in the morning for a long, long time. Eventually, we moved our servers from a data center in LA to AWS, and this completely changed how we develop software. It was really like moving to cloud was like an amazing positive thing for us. We had to focus. Furthermore, we also had to focus significantly on designing solutions that worked in a high latency environment. Like as I was mentioning earlier, our user base had internet connection which can be all the way from 2G to like super fast 5G environment. So as a backend owner, I had to be really careful about making sure that our request response model was heavily optimized. And on the front end side, we were also designing our user experience in which user felt that the app was super responsive. So yeah, Those are some of the biggest challenges that I can think of right now.
And scaling from 200,000 users to 100 million users sounds on paper like a great problem to have. I mean, but what did you actually learn from your role in scaling such a large tech company like that?
Sure. So I learned that, the problem that you are trying to solve, they kind of remain the same, whether it is around 200,000 users or 100 million users. We basically were trying to solve for problems like user growth, how to keep the user engaged, how to retain them for a long period of time, how to build products that can generate revenue, whether it is a cross subscription model or an advertising model. But what changes is this actually the scale of the problem and the number of users that you have to support. So at that point, you really have to go deep onto and focusing on how to go about building these solutions. I felt that scaling became exponentially harder as we grew, as there are obvious limits to growth. But as there are obvious limits to growth, if you keep on following a particular solution, even at scale, if you're still solving the same problem, but you need different solutions at that level. You need to attack the problem from different angle, maybe double down on like really tiny details. Things, for example, that were not important at small scale, will start moving matrix needle significantly when there is a significant growth. And that means that we have to focus a lot harder and think much more deeply about our problem space and the solutions that we are using to solve these problems.
And you've been on such an amazing journey. And I don't think you often realise until you look over your shoulder just how far you've come. But so if you were to look back at that younger version of yourself with the incredibly warm and noisy bedroom where you were learning and where you are now, what are the biggest lessons that you've learned from the whole experience along the way?
Sure. So my biggest learning was to focus on the user and their needs and build a solution that addresses those needs. A high growth of user base takes care of a lot of issues for a startup. It makes the organization attractive for new hires because everybody wants to work on, really a huge amount of user base. Everybody wants to have an impact. So it becomes really easy for you to hire. It also makes it easier to raise further funding, venture capital. Saavn raised around $100+ million of venture capital before getting acquired. And also it makes it really attractive to potential investors and acquisition opportunities. Second learning was to hire people with right mindset. In earlier days, you had no idea about whether you are going to reach 100 million users or you are going to pack bags and go home. So you really needed people who can understand and have the right startup mindset or hustling mindset, and growth mindset, whether they want to, how they can learn from their mistakes and improve on top of it. So I participated, in fact, a lot in hiring in those early days for right skill and fit, and also held the bar to make sure we had super smart and right engineering talent coming in.
But I'm curious, how did your career path then change from being just a software engineer guy to the engineering manager? Can you tell me a little bit more about that transition?
Sure. So I always wanted to place myself in a position where I can have a high impact. Since I was with Saavn from the very beginning, I ended up owning a lot of core systems across the stack. And as we hired more people, there was a need of someone who was a strong hands-on engineer, but also was interested in people aspects, especially around mentoring, coaching, and supporting team with the technical leadership. I took that opportunity and really, I think, excelled there. Management role at Saavn was very hands-on. I was a technical lead and a very involved high-level leader or engineer first and people manager second. My role was still technical, but my scope was organization-wide. And I was heavily involved in building processes around how engineers developed and shipped code, deciding on what and how we measured success, for example. Those were some of the ways that I transitioned from being an engineer to an EM.
And as an engineer, you strike me as someone that's always had a continuous improvement mindset. So when you're now an engineering manager, how do you improve on that and improve not only yourself, but the people around you?
Yeah, so I really understood that, it's a slightly different job. Like being a manager is also very lonely. So like sometimes I had to understand and focus that a lot of people have gone through the path that I am on and also have succeeded. So the best way to improve was to reach out, ask for help if you don't know how to figure it out, talk with other managers. There is a wonderful community out there. There are so many forums that you can use. Uh, so read books about the issues that you are dealing with. Listen to audiobooks on your commute, but in short, do whatever it takes to improve your understanding of how to get humans to work as a team collaboratively. Um, Another thing that helped me was to be a bit more intentional around how I spend my time. As a manager, I can contribute, on hiring, technical aspects, performance management, organizational alignment. So it's trying to identify your value in the engineering org. If there is a team is a bit more on the junior side in engineering, then you can go and work on the really technical aspects of it and help them grow and be and model a behavior which encourages them to follow you, and really guide them to make them better engineers. If you want to focus more on the hiring side, then you have to just keep sourcing from all around internet and work with your recruiting teams as well. So it's basically like juggling, where sometimes you intentionally drop the ball on certain areas so that you can provide overall better value to the team. But also, I learned I can be a better manager if I delegate work. I worked with really smart people, so there's no point micromanaging them. So it is also about it is mostly about like losing control and putting people in the right roles, which help them to grow and at the same time allows the team to achieve the goals.
Like you mentioned control there, and of course, as you've been an engineer, I think anyone that's been an engineer, it never leaves them at all. So I've got to ask, do you ever miss getting your hands virtually dirty as an engineer and wanting to muscle in and take over? Do you miss it at all?
Yeah, you are always an engineer by heart. So, and I will. The beauty of being a software engineer is that you can always write code or hack in your own time, and you can always build software solutions on the side. So, as an EM, I can also specifically on the job, I can also keep aside some time for myself to write code, which is not in team's critical path, but improves the overall productivity and product quality. I also consider you can write like dashboards. You can also think about how you can improve deployment tools, whatever helps team to really ship code faster and high quality. I also consider participating in technical design of the product as a very hardcore engineering task, and that is one of my responsibilities as an EM to be involved in. And I'm really into it and my during on my daily work. So that keeps me a little bit happy just to think about it from an engineering perspective. Besides that, I tend to keep myself involved in the community. I try to learn as much about the new tech trends. You would find me reading highscalability.com, InfoQ, uh, following your podcast, and there are so many great other avenues where I can learn about new tech trends. So I tend to do all of that to satisfy my engineering side as well.
Now, you've already had a fantastic career in technology, but you strike me as the kind of guy that doesn't look back too often and is all about looking forward and having goals. So what's next for you, Arpan? Is there anything else that you can share about your ambitions and your future plans?
Sure. So I tend to put my goals in like short, mid, and long term buckets. For the short and medium term, I see myself at Twitter. Twitter is like really, I think Twitter is one of the foundational communication layer of this public internet. There are tons of opportunities there to do some great work with amazing people. And in fact, we are hiring a lot. So come join my team if you are interested. Reach out. I also want to contribute back to software community. So on that front, I have been participating in conferences and then various tech organizations. So recently, I was awarded a senior IEEE membership, and I also became, you might know, Britain has Institution of Engineering and Technology, so I became a member there. I also am judging various prestigious tech awards like Webby Awards, Codie Awards, Stevie Awards, etc. So that helps me that helps me engage with the tech community. And in long term, I just want to keep working in a high impact software leadership roles. I hope it is at Twitter, but we'll see how it goes.
Now, one of the reasons I record this Daily Tech podcast is I'm quite conscious that there's going to be people listening in 165 countries to our conversation. Not just this week, next week, it could even be a year or two from now that they suddenly discover this episode. And they're going to be inspired by your journey, and they could be sat listening with that noisy server in their bedroom going through that same learning process that you have. So if anyone is inspired by your journey that's taken you from India to San Francisco and working at Twitter, what's the best way to reach out and contact you?
Sure. So when I was early in my career, I got a lot of help, and I really learned from just reaching out to people who were experts in their own areas. And I really liked that because it helped me improving my understanding of the world. So I believe in contributing back to the community as well, and so we'll be super happy to help anyone as much as I can. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and Twitter. The best way is to reach out to me and connect with me on LinkedIn or tweet to me. I will share my links with you, and you can definitely reach out to share those links to LinkedIn and Twitter profile that you can find on the accompanying links with this podcast. So yeah. Really happy to be here.
And as someone that works at Twitter, I've got to ask, do you automatically get the blue tick against your name, or do you have to work for it like everyone else?
I guess it is on the latter side, and I don't get any special treatment just to be a Twitter employee. So no checkbox no blue check mark for my profile.
Well, I'll add all the links to your social profiles on the blog post that will accompany this podcast episode. You really have been on an inspirational journey. But what I love most about what you do is that willingness to give back to the software community and help other people, because that's what it's all about. And I always say at the end of every episode that technology works best when it brings people together, and you're living proof of that. So a big thank you, Arpan, for coming on and sharing that story with me today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neil.
What a great guy. I love Arpan, and I love his story that began in India and going on to play with noisy servers, learning his trade. I also kept his room warm in Seattle, and then helping a company scale from 200,000 to almost 100 million users, and of course finally settling in Silicon Valley and working for Twitter. But what really strikes me about Arpan, and what I love more than anything, is his passion to give a little back to that same software community that offered him that helping hand. Because that is what life is all about. And I cannot thank him enough for coming on today and sharing that personal story, because I genuinely believe that there will be someone somewhere listening to that story thinking, I want to follow in his footsteps. And if that is you and you do want to contact Arpan, please do that and let me know how Arpan's story impacted you and what you took away from that. So remember, you can contact me anytime at techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk if you want to click on any of the links and read more about Arpan. Or you can get me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. I'm the easiest man in the world to find. But a little tip there, just go for Neil C. Hughes. I think that's the only me out there. So I hope you enjoyed today's show as much as I did and understand what I'm trying to achieve on this podcast. As we head towards 1,000 episodes, the mission still remains the same. From the very first episode, I said technology really does work best when it brings people together. And I think Arpan's story really cements that. So on that cheesy note, I'm going to send an incredibly genuine and warm thank you to each and every one of you for not only listening to this tech podcast, but also for allowing me to be a part of your journey wherever you are. So thanks for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.